Section 4 of the Gospel in Brief by Leo Tolstoy. This recording is in the public domain. Recording by K. Hand. Chapter 2, Life in the Spirit. Therefore man must work not for the flesh, but for the spirit. Which art in heaven. It happened once that Jesus with his disciples went through a field on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and on the way plucked ears of corn, bruised them in their hands, and ate the grain. But according to the teaching of the Orthodox, God had made an agreement with Moses that all should observe the Sabbath and do nothing on that day. According to this teaching of the Orthodox, God commanded that he who worked on the Sabbath should be stoned to death. The Orthodox saw that the disciples were bruising ears of corn on the Sabbath and said, "It is not right to do so on the Sabbath. One must not work on the Sabbath, and you are bruising ears of corn." God ordained the Sabbath and commanded the breaking of it should be punished with death. Jesus heard this and said, "If you understand what is the meaning of God's words, 'I desire love and not sacrifice,' you would not attach blame to that which is not blameworthy. Man is more important than the Sabbath." It happened another time on a Sabbath, that when Jesus was teaching in the synagogue, a sick woman came up to him and asked him to help her. And Jesus began to cure her. Then the Orthodox church elder was angry with Jesus for this, and said to the people, "It is said in the law of God, there are 6 days in the week on which to work." But Jesus in reply asked the Orthodox professors of the law, "Well then, in your opinion, may not one help a man on the Sabbath?" And they did not know what to answer. Then Jesus said, "Deceivers, does not each of you untie his beast from the manger and lead him to water on the Sabbath? And if his sheep falls into a well, anyone will run and drag it out, although even on the Sabbath. And a man is much better than a sheep. But you say that one must not help a man. What then, in your opinion, must one do on the Sabbath, good or evil? Save a soul or destroy it? Good must be done always, on the Sabbath too." Jesus once saw a tax gatherer receiving taxes. The tax gatherer was called Matthew. Jesus began to speak with him, and Matthew understood him, liked his teaching, and invited him to his house, and showed him hospitality. When Jesus came to Matthew, there came also Matthew's friends, tax gatherers and unbelievers, and Jesus did not disdain them, and sat down, he and his disciples. And the Orthodox saw this, and said to Jesus' disciples, "How is it that your teacher eats with tax gatherers and unbelievers?" According to the teaching of the Orthodox, God forbade communion with unbelievers. Jesus heard and said, "He who is satisfied with his health does not need a doctor, but he who is ill does. Understand what is the meaning of God's words, 'I desire love and not sacrifice.' I cannot teach a change of faith to those who consider themselves Orthodox, but I teach those who consider themselves unbelievers." There came to Jesus Orthodox professors of the law from Jerusalem, and they saw that his disciples and Jesus himself ate bread with unwashed hands, and these Orthodox began to condemn him for this, because they themselves strictly observed, according to church tradition, how plates and dishes should be washed, and would not eat unless they had been so washed. Also, they would eat nothing from the market unless they had washed it. And the Orthodox professors of the law asked him, "Why do you live not according to church tradition, but take and eat bread with unwashed hands?" And he answered them, "But in what way do you break God's commandment, following your church tradition? God said to you, 'Honor your father and mother,' but you have twisted it so that everyone can say, 'I give to God what I used to give to my parents.' And he who so says need not support his mother and father. Thus, then, you break God's commandment by church tradition. Deceivers! The prophet Isaiah spoke the truth about you. Because this people only fall down before me in words, and honor me with their tongue, while their heart is far from me, and because their fear of me is only a human law which they have learnt by heart, therefore I will perform a wonderful and extraordinary thing upon this people: the wisdom of its wise men shall be lost, and the reason of its thinkers shall be dimmed. Woe to them who take thought to hide their desires from the Eternal, and who do their deeds in darkness. And so it is with you. You leave that which is important in the law, that which is God's commandment, and observe your human tradition as to the washing of cups." And Jesus called the people to him and said, "Hearken all and understand. There is nothing in the world that, entering a man, could defile him, but that which goes forth from him, this defiles a man. Let love and mercy be in your soul, and then all will be clean. Try to understand this." And when he returned home, his disciples asked him, "What do these words mean?" And he said, "Do you also not understand this? Do you not understand that everything external, that which is of the flesh, cannot defile a man? The reason is, it enters not his soul, but his body. It enters the body, and afterward goes out from it. Only that can defile a man which goes out from the man himself, from his soul. Because from the soul of man proceed evil, fornication, impurity, murder, theft, covetousness, wrath, deceit, insolence, envy, calumny, pride, and every kind of folly. All this evil is out of the soul of man, and it alone can defile a man. After this, the Passover came, and Jesus went to Jerusalem and entered the temple. In the enclosure of the temple stood cattle, cows, bulls, rams, and there were cots full of pigeons, and money changers behind their counters. All this was necessary in order to make offerings to God. The animals were slaughtered and offered in the temple. This was the method of prayer among the Jews, as taught by the orthodox professors of the law. Jesus went into the temple, twisted a whip, drove all the cattle out of the enclosure, and set free all the doves. And he scattered all the money, and bade that none of this should be brought into the temple. He said, "The prophet Isaiah said to you, the house of God is not the temple in Jerusalem, but the whole world of God's people. And the prophet Jeremiah also told you, do not believe the falsehood that here is the house of the Eternal. Do not believe this, but change your life. Do not judge falsely. Do not oppress the stranger, the widow, and the orphan. Do not shed innocent blood, and do not come into the house of God and say, now we may quietly do foul deeds. Do not make my house a den of robbers." And the Jews began to dispute, and said to him, "You say that our piety is wrong. By what proofs will you show this?" And turning to them, Jesus said, "Destroy this temple, and I will in 3 days awaken a new living temple." And the Jews said, "But how will you at once make a new temple, when this was 46 years in building?" And Jesus said to them, "I speak to you of that which is more important than the temple. You would not say this if you understood the meaning of the words of the prophet. I, God, do not rejoice at your offerings, but rejoice at your love to each other. The living temple is the whole world of men, when they love each other." And then in Jerusalem many people believed in what he said, but he himself believed in nothing external, because he knew that everything is within man. He had no need that anyone should give witness of man, because he knew that in man is the Spirit. And Jesus happened once to be passing through Samaria. He passed by the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the place where Jacob gave to his son Joseph. There was Jacob's well. Jesus was tired and sat beside the well. His disciples went into the town to fetch bread. And a woman came from Sychar to draw water, and Jesus asked her to give him to drink. And she said to him, "How is it that you ask me to give you to drink? For you Jews have no intercourse with us Samaritans." But he said to her, "If you knew me, and knew what I teach, you would not say this. And you would give me to drink, and I would give you the water of life. Whoever drinks of the water you have will thirst again. But whoever shall drink of the water I have shall always be satisfied, and this water shall bring him everlasting life." The woman understood that he was speaking of things divine, and said to him, "I see that you are a prophet, and wish to teach me. But how are you to teach me divine things, when you are a Jew, and I a Samaritan? Our people worship God upon this hill, but you Jews say that the house of God is only in Jerusalem. You cannot teach me divine things, because you have one belief, and we another." And Jesus said to her, "Believe me, woman, the time is already here when people, to pray to the Father, will come neither to this hill nor to Jerusalem. The time has come when the real worshippers of God will worship the Heavenly Father in spirit and with works. Such are the worshippers the Father needs. God is a spirit, and he must be worshipped in the spirit and with works." The woman did not understand what he told her, and said, "I have heard that the messenger of God will come, he whom they call the Anointed. He will then declare everything." And Jesus said to her, "It is I, the same who has spoken with you. Expect nothing more." After this, Jesus came into the land of Judea, and there lived with his disciples and taught. At that time John taught the people near Salem, and bathed them in the river Aenon, for John was not yet put in prison. And a dispute arose between the disciples of John and the hearers of Jesus, as to which was better, John's cleansing in water or Jesus' teaching. And they came to John and said to him, "You cleanse with water, but Jesus only teaches, and all go to him. What have you to say of him?" John said, "A man of himself can teach nothing unless God teach him. Who speaks of the earth is of the earth, but whosoever speaks of God is from God. It is nowise possible to prove whether the words that are spoken are from God or not from God. God is a spirit, he cannot be measured, and he cannot be proved. He who shall understand the word of the Spirit by this very thing proves that he is of the Spirit. The Father, loving his Son, has entrusted all to him. Whoever believes in the Son has life, and whoever does not believe in the Son has not life. God is the Spirit in man." After this, there came to Jesus one of the Orthodox, and invited him to dinner. Jesus went in and sat down at the table. The host noticed that he did not wash before dinner, and wondered thereat. And Jesus said to him, "You Orthodox wash everything outside, but are you clean inside? Be well disposed to men, and all will be clean." And while he sat in the house of the Orthodox, there came a woman of the town, who was an unbeliever. She had learnt that Jesus was in the house of the Orthodox man, and she came there too, bringing a bottle of scent. And she knelt at his feet, wept, and washed his feet with her tears, wiped them with her hair, and poured scent over them. The Orthodox man saw this, and thought to himself, "He is hardly a prophet. If he were really a prophet, he would know what kind of a woman it is that is washing his feet. He would know that this is a wrongdoer, and would not allow her to touch him." Jesus guessed his thought, and turning to him, said, "Shall I tell you what I think?" The host assented, and Jesus said, "Well, it is this. 2 men held themselves debtors to a certain man of property, one for 500 pence, the other for 50. And neither the one nor the other had anything to pay with. The creditor pardoned both. Now, in your opinion, which will love the creditor more, and shew him greater attention?" And he said, "Of course, he that owed more." Jesus pointed to the woman, and said, "So it is with you and with this woman. You consider yourself orthodox, and therefore a small debtor. She considers herself an unbeliever, and therefore a great debtor. I came to your house. You did not give me water to wash my feet. She washed my feet with her tears, and wiped them with her hair. You did not kiss me, but she kissed my feet. You did not give me oil to anoint my head, but she anoints my feet with precious scent. He who rests in orthodoxy will not do works of love, but he who considers himself an unbeliever will do works of love. And for works of love, all is forgiven." And he said to her, "All your wickedness is forgiven you." And Jesus said, "All depends upon what each man considers himself. Whoever considers himself good will not be good, but whoever considers himself bad will become good." And Jesus said further, 2 men once came into a temple to pray, one orthodox and the other a tax gatherer. The orthodox man prayed thus: "I thank thee, God, that I am not as other men. I am not a miser, nor a libertine. I am not a rogue, not such a worthless fellow as that tax gatherer. I fast twice weekly, and give away a tithe of my property." But the tax gatherer stood afar off, and dared not look up at the sky, but merely beat his breast and said, "Lord, look down upon me, worthless as I am." Well, and this man was better than the orthodox, for the reason that whoever exalts himself shall be humbled, and whoever humbles himself shall be exalted. After this, disciples of John came to Jesus and said, "Why do we and the orthodox fast much, while your disciples do not fast? For according to the law, God commanded people to fast." And Jesus said to them, "While the bridegroom is at the wedding, no one grieves. Only when the bridegroom is away do people grieve. Having life, one must not grieve. The eternal worship of God cannot be combined with works of love. The old teaching of the external worship of God cannot be combined with my teaching of works of love to one's neighbor. To combine my teaching with the old is the same as to tear off a shred from a new garment and sew it on an old one. You will tear the new, and not mend the old. Either all my teaching must be accepted, or all the old. And having once accepted my teaching, it is impossible to keep the old teaching of purification, fasting, and the Sabbath. Just as new wine cannot be poured into old wineskins, or the old skins will burst and the wine will run out. But new wine must be poured into new skins, and both one and the other will remain whole." End of section 4.